Hello, hello. Welcome back, Chris. And hello, everyone. We are joined again today by Chris Holt, lifestyle and nutritional coach. We did part one a few weeks ago, and when we hit the 1 hour mark, we still had so much to say that we decided to return for part two. So thank
Well,
you.
maybe there will be part three, four, five. I don't know.
Yeah, well, definitely in future seasons for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for rejoining us. Recapping on last time, we really took a deep dive into your adoption story, which was very, very interesting. And I had lots of people message me about that and comment, which also touched upon, but we didn't get into some mental health stuff, potentially lingering from your adoption experience and generational,
Mhm.
and then obviously a lot of things that you've gone through in your, life as well. You touched upon a few times having to have, you went through pretty extensive surgery on your heart, and you said something about your lungs. So I was
Yeah,
very
we can talk about.
good story.
Yeah, I think all the medical stuff kind of ties in with the mental health stuff, and um, yeah, so that comes hand in hand. But yeah, I'm an open book, so more than happy to talk about all that stuff. And I guess we can maybe start there, because I think that that's the moment when I realized maybe I didn't know what depression was. You know, you hear the
A
term a
lot
lot.
of people don't when
Yeah.
they come to therapy. They're like, I don't know what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so for me, my kind of health issues, all of them I was pretty much born with, which I didn't know about the lung issues until I had my first lung collapse. So I was in eighth grade, and I was on the varsity basketball team at the school I was going to in Norway. And I know that sounds impressive being in eighth grade, but as you know, small school, you just kind of show up
So
and you're
that happened right after you left our school.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was we had a scrimmage against the faculty because those are really the only people we could play. So it was really just high school, like eighth grade, ninth grade kids playing adults. So I remember there was a science teacher. His name was Mr. Mullen or Mullins. Uh, he had like there was like a loose ball and he kind of elbowed me in the chest accidentally, right? Knocked the wind out of me, didn't think anything of it. And then I got home and I was walking up the stairs in our house, and then I just like a super sharp pain. It hurt to breathe, and I just was like paralyzed on the stairs to a point where I couldn't even like call for help. And then finally, someone found me and then took me to the hospital. Um, they did an X-ray. It's like, oh, collapsed lung. We're gonna do a chest tube. And in Norway, they for a chest tube they don't give you anesthesia.
Is
So,
like
yeah.
what you see on TV shows where they stick a, oh God, you didn't have anything?
No, so I get rolled into an OR. I remember I was waiting for something to put me out. Like I don't know what you put the thing on my mouth or my
Yeah,
face and put me
oxygen
out,
or
or
yeah,
like
gas.
yeah,
Gas, not
something, right?
oxygen.
Yeah, yeah, not actually. Um, and nothing was happening, and so then they were like, "All right, we're gonna insert the chest tube." I'm like, "Well, don't you put me under?" They're like, "No, no, 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 no. This is a routine procedure." So I said, "What are you going to give me?" They're like, "We'll give you Novocaine for the incision." So I'm like, "Okay." So I just remember they injected my side, which was obviously very painful. Um, and then I could feel pressure when they made the incision. So I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Okay, this is okay. This is okay." And then they started shoving the chest tube into my pleural space. And
Wait,
the
wait,
Novocaine
what's
was
that?
only, huh?
Into your wet space?
Pleural, like my the kind of your lung cavity or your chest cavity.
I don't know the medical term, sorry.
Oh yeah. So basically, the Novocaine's good for a certain depth, obviously. So once it starts going in between your intercostal muscles and your ribs, and then into your chest cavity or your lung space. There's no Novocaine there, right? So every millimeter, they're just shoving this thing into my chest. I mean, it was the longest 30 minutes of my life. And so, um, fast forward, I was in the hospital. They removed the chest tube. No stitches, which was weird. They just packed it with this goo, and I just remember it burned very badly. And so then I was fine. Fast forward, lung collapses again. So they go in, they're like, look, we've already done the chest tube.
When
Um,
the first time, did they try and establish why your lung collapsed? They
no.
just thought that is that a normal thing to happen to
They
someone?
said, yeah, sometimes it can happen or whatever.
Huh.
Um, so then they did some more scans and they're like, oh, well, you've been born with these blisters on your lungs called blebs. And if there's too much pressure in your chest cavity, then they rupture and then your lung collapses and your lungs are covered with them. I'm like, oh, that's gross. So what they did was they did something called a thoracotomy where they go in with scopes and they cut out these blisters, basically suture them, and then they do a pleurid or a thoracotomy and a pleurodesis. The thoracotomy is the cutting out and doing those things, but the pleurodesis is what they basically throw like a talc-like powder inside your chest cavity, so it attaches your chest wall and your lung wall, so then it can't collapse. So I'm like, okay, so they did that on the right side. Very long recovery, very just not fun.
Like how long is long?
I remember I was in the hospital maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then
Wow. Yeah.
just getting around, it was just it was I just remember it was maybe 6 months. I don't know. It was I obviously couldn't play sports, and that's when I experienced my first bout of depression because up until that point I identified as like being active, being a basketball or doing sports, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so now I couldn't do anything active, and I'm like, who am I? And like this is depressing, and like whatever. So I remember it happened again on my left side, and it was right before we were in my grandparents' house for the summer. We were going to basketball camp, and it happened. And that I freaked out because I already had gone through all this, and I'm like, oh my God, this is happening again. I I don't want to.
Where
I'd
were
rather
you? Where?
New Jersey.
Okay. So what was that medical experience like?
Oh, they put me out.
Okay,
I
good.
don't remember anything,
I
right?
would be like, give me all the things. Okay.
Yes. I'm like, oh, that was so much better, right? So they do this procedure. I remember that doctor's name was Dr. Kaplan. And fast forward, he didn't do it correctly.
Oh my.
So my lung collapsed. So part of my lung was stuck to my chest wall and the other half was collapsed. So then I was in Texas at the time. And so I went to Texas Children's Hospital. The the physician there, the surgeon, he's like, look, we have two options right now. We can go through your chest, and that's going to require us to break your sternum, or we can go through your back, and we don't have to break any bones. I was like, go through my back. And he says, I just want you to know, as much as that sounds worse going through your sternum, your back is going to be a much longer recovery process. I'm like, I don't care. I just don't want you to break any of my bones. And he's like, just letting you know it's longer.
If you break a bone, that's like an 8-week recovery process,
Yeah,
right?
well,
At
as a
least,
kid,
right?
yeah, as a kid, I'm just like, no, the idea of you cracking my sternum open and opening up my chest, I'm like, no, 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 go through my back. So basically, what he had to
They
do,
give you a choice when you were,
I,
well, a young teenager.
yeah, yeah,
They shouldn't have given you a choice. They should have done what, anyway.
yeah, agreed. In retrospect, I'm like, why couldn't they just done that? But it actually, fast forward for the heart surgery, is actually a better thing. But anyway, so what he did, he basically opened up my back and then, which required a much larger incision because then he had to take his hand, put it inside my chest cavity to pull off my lung from the chest wall that it was attached to redo the whole procedure and then close me up. So for like, I don't know, 8 months, I was leaning like this. I couldn't stand up straight because all the muscles in my ribs and the intercostal muscles were all moved around.
Yeah.
And I remember I wake up and it maybe been a week out of surgery and I was fucked up. And he just
Ugh.
says, "Hey, it's like a formal kick in the ribs." I'm like, "What?" Like, no. He says, I just wanted to let you know that I told you this is gonna be a longer, more painful recovery.
That's so, like, wake you up and be like, I told you so.
Yeah, yeah.
What a
I'm
jerk.
like, but you're in so much pain that it's just like I'm not listening. I'm like, whatever. I'm just trying to get to the next second, right? So So that was long, but that was kind of the first moments where I was just really depressed. And I remember it got to a point where I just was becoming antisocial and I just didn't want to do anything. And my mom, and
But
this
you
was during the first, huh?
you couldn't really do
Well,
anything.
exactly, right? But like I could see my friends doing all these things, right? Like they were all there was like a senior trip in Texas where they all went to, or even in Norway, they went to these big trips, and I just couldn't partake in any of them, right? And so I remember early on, and it was after the second lung surgery or the first lung surgery after the first chest tube. My basketball coach in Norway, his name is Chris Andre. He actually runs an international school in forget the country now, but I reconnected with him after like 20 years, which was kind of cool. But I remember he went to Harvard. He played football at Harvard, and I didn't know any of this at the time. But my mom, I think my mom spoke to him and said, "Hey, can you sit Chris down and have a talk with him because we're a little worried." So he sits me down and I remember it this way. And when I reconnected with him, I told him the story and he says, "Yeah, that's kind of how that went, but like it's a little different from my memory, right?" But what I remember is I was really angry and he sits me down and he says, "Chris, I'm going to tell you something my football coach in college told me. I'm not going to explain it to you, but you'll figure it out." I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Picture yourself straddling a line. Your left foot's in the past, your right foot's in the future, and you're pissing on the present." And I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Get out of my office." I'm like, "Coach, I don't know what that means." He said, "You'll figure it out." So for years, this image haunted me. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And as I've gotten older, I've realized, look, I can dwell on what's happened, but it's done. Take the silver lining, move forward. I can worry about things happen again, live in the what ifs, but obviously I have no control over that. So if I want to control and dictate where I go in this life, I need to control what I have control over. And that's,
In therapy, that's very much focusing on the here and now.
yes, Eckhart Tolle, right? Power now. But it's been
Depression,
difficult.
you're living in the past.
Yes.
Anxiety, you're worried about the future, right? So
Yes.
let's focus
But
on
that's the
the
whole like that's the challenge, right? Is I think our egos are always attracted to that drama, right? It's not perfect, right? We all catch ourselves living in those past and future kind of
I
mindset.
had a really hard time with the first time I was exposed to his stuff. And I think I
Mm.
had like a book, an audio book,
Hmm.
and it was like, I
Was
was
it
like,
was it was it read by him?
yeah, I think so.
His voice is very like it's interesting,
Yeah,
but
but it was like he quit his job or he lost his job and he's like sitting on a bench and then he realized none of it matters. And I
yes.
was like, no, I don't understand. Like,
Yeah,
how do
I
I
would
apply this
agree.
to me right now? Like, what?
Yeah, if I was sitting on the bench and I realized nothing mattered, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, this is a positive thing." I'd be like, "Nothing matters, so like, why be here?" Right?
Yeah, but it was also, I was like, yeah, but you have outgoings. How are you paying your rent? Like, what, how are you eating? Where are you sleeping? I don't
No, it's the
understand.
logistics. It's the logistics. I know, and it's like, well, that sounds great, but like, really, what? I want to know details, right?
Yeah.
So, it's challenging. So, like, those were things that I think I identified with for the longest time, and so for me, it was very much, um, anytime I saw someone experience something painful. Like I remember someone like
Mm,
in architecture school and someone stubbed their toe and they were like freaking out, and I just sat there. I was like,
loser.
if you only knew, right, what real pain was. And then I just got real angry, right? And then it got to a point where I was in college and it just nothing like I had a really bad car accident. I fell asleep driving, almost killed me and my brothers. And so after that, I remember I couldn't get in a car for a long time. Like, and then that was more trauma because happened. We were camp counselors at the YMCA for like 3 summers. So my brothers and I went to a midnight bowling thing where they had put on strobe lights, and with other camp counselors, it was late, maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was driving back. My brothers were sleeping. Justin was in the front, Jeremy was in the back, and I turned on our road in Texas to go home and I fell asleep. And so when I woke up, I heard Justin just say, "Oh shit," and we had hit a guardrail and it literally launched us over this hill and the car and then I don't remember anything. So I wake up, I can't move, and so now I think I'm paralyzed because I physically can't move. I'm very disoriented. I feel like I'm sweating because there's just like something coming down my face. but I'm just really, yeah, I'm really disoriented. And then all I know is I'm looking out my window where the window's not there anymore, and Justin's there. Right. And I'm like, what is he doing outside the car? Like, where am I? And then he's like, and I just remember him saying, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Jeremy had crawled out the back and he was just like, he was freaking out. And then Jeremy was kind of like in and out, but he's like, you need to call mom or do something. And so then I pass out. Then I wake up and there's like lights and firefighters and they're cutting the roof off the car. So what I had realized that the Justin had said that when we rolled down the hill, the car went like three times side to side, two times front to back. But every time it landed on my side. So like the top of the car was pinning me to my seat, which is why I couldn't move. And I had a massive piece of windshield in my skull. So that's where I was bleeding, right? So they cut the roof off. I don't remember anything. I wake up, they're stapling my head, which was not fun. They kept on giving me Novocaine, and I kept on feeling everything. And I don't remember too much, but I remember Justin getting really angry. My parents were there, obviously, but because I just kept on saying like I can feel everything, and I was like screaming, and then Justin was getting angry at the nurse. He's like, "Give him more Novocaine," like blah blah blah. And then I don't remember anything. And then from there, I couldn't sleep lying down for maybe 6 months because of the head trauma. So anytime I'd lie down flat, I get vertigo and everything starts spinning. So, and I had lacerations from seatbelt. My whole face was, or this side of my face was so swollen that I looked like Sloth from the Goonies. It was like real bad. Yeah. So mix that, being in a hospital again, going through all that, going through the lung surgeries at that point in my life, I was just like, I just got angry anytime someone experienced pain, and that it didn't register as like, you don't get it, right? And so then I got real angry and I was real depressed, right? And so then my aunt, one of my aunts, my mom's sister, her story is crazy. She is an attorney. She was out getting out of her car one night. It was late at the trunk, getting her briefcase, and some drunk driver comes in and pins her between her car and his car and drives off. So she almost died. And she's gone through maybe to this day, she's still going through surgeries. They said she wasn't going to walk again and all this stuff, right? And she called me one day and I was telling her all this, and she says, Chris, you're playing a victim. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, look, I've gone through a lot of, you know, personal stuff with my accident, right? And that's been 20 plus years of surgeries, and you know that. And she says, so I could easily look at you and say, you have no idea what real pain is, right? But at the end of the day, pain is relative, right? So if someone stubs their toe and that's the worst pain they've ever felt, who are you to tell them it isn't? I'm like, okay. And she says, and at the end of the day, you got to stick to the facts. What are the facts? For me, I was hit by a drunk driver. That's it. It ends there. For the longest time, I built it up in my head to be this bigger thing than it really was. But at the end of the day, I was hit by a drunk driver, and that's it. And since then, I've faced that man, I've forgiven him, and it's done. What are your facts? You had a car accident, fell asleep driving. You were born with some health issues. That's it. She says, stop turning yourself into this martyr. Stop being this victim, right? And that's when I was like, oh, okay. I I can see that now, right? And it still took time to get out of that mindset. But then, you know, I realized, look, if I just stay angry, right, over things that I had no control over, and then I use that as my identity, as like I just identify as this person that's just been like got a shit deal, right? And then I remember seeing, I don't know if you know the man, his name is Randy Pausch. He has a famous lecture he gives. It's called The Last Lecture. And he wrote a little book. And you watch this lecture, and he's talking about, he was like an early adopter in like um, animation. So I think he was somewhat tied to like Pixar and like jobs and stuff like that. But anyway, he gives this long thing talking about his legacy and all these things. And then he comes to this last point where he tells you during this lecture that you do not know that he has pancreatic cancer. And he's like, look, we cannot help the cards that were dealt. All we can do is play the hand. So you can choose to be like, oh, this is my shit hand, and like, this is why I'm not where I want to be, and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to do the blame game. Or you can make the most of what you have. And that's actually, you have more agency, right? And I
Yeah.
think we all want in our lives more control in our lives. And I tell my clients all the time, it's like, look, you have more control than you think, right? It's
It's
just,
like that quote that which it's the same as the cards one that you just the you can't control the ocean, but you can learn how to surf or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that idea. And so as I've gotten older, I've realized that even now, fast forward, I think I have had a lot of trauma from the car accident and then the surgical stuff. And so I just never wanted to be back in an OR, right?
Yeah, of
And I
course.
remember by the time I had my fourth lung surgery, I remember I knew what was happening. I was like, okay, like, and at that point, my fourth lung surgery on my left side, I just given into it. I'm like, it is what it is, but my body still had reaction. So I remember going into the OR and my body went into shock, but I was so calm. Like my body was just shaking,
That's
and
your
my
body.
mom was
Yeah.
freaking out, right?
Mhm.
And she's like, "What's wrong with him?" And I just remember telling her, I was like, "Mom, it's okay. It's just, it's just a reaction." Like,
PTSD
yeah, yeah,
is actually what it is.
yeah, pretty much. And so I knew I was born with a congenital heart defect, a bicuspid aortic valve, which is the most common. Arnold Schwarzenegger had one. I mean, it's pretty common. So I knew eventually I was going to have the valve replaced, but I just kind of put it off, put it off, put it off. And now, like I was 40 at the time. I'm 42 now. And I just remember going in for a checkup with my cardiologist, and he says, "Look, Chris, we've put this off long enough. Your valve is failing. There's atrophy, there's stenosis. If you can keep going, but then if you have a heart arrhythmia during a workout, you will just literally just die. Like, so what do you want to do?" And at that point, it'd been years since my last surgery or like being in a hospital like that. I'm like, no, I don't want to, I don't want to. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm such a fucking hypocrite. I tell my clients all the time, in life, we need to choose the hard thing, right? Make the hard choice. Because the easy choice gets you nowhere. There's no growth, you don't learn anything. And I'm like, this is the more challenging thing to do.
That's the irony with clients, right? I do this all the time too when I'm giving them advice about stuff, and then I'm like,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
ah,
Yeah. I'm like,
now I have
damn
to do it too.
it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make the harder choice and I'll elect to do this now. And so it was June of like 2 years ago. Uh, actually, next month will be, yeah, 2 years. And got a mechanical valve done because obviously I'm younger, and if I did a biological valve, that would have to be replaced every 10 years. And I'm like, I'm not doing this every 10 years. But the side effect is I have to be on blood thinners forever. So I'm
Yeah.
like, that's fine. What they didn't tell you is that when you have a mechanical valve, uh, there's a ticking.
Oh no. So
So I wake up.
you're like the
And
tin.
it's Yeah, it's like no, the people are like, "Oh, you're like that crocodile and Hook that swallowed the clock."
Oh yeah.
So I'm sitting there, I'm like, "What the hell is that sound?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I couldn't sleep. And I'm like, "Oh my God. Oh my I." And then I started to get a little panicky. I'm like, "This is stuck in my chest. Oh my God. I can't I just hear this ticking." And then I tried to put earplugs in, but then
No,
what that
it's
does,
inside you. Yeah.
so
Ah.
think of the chirping sound a smoke detector gives off when it needs a battery.
No, I hate it. Yeah.
The chirping between my ears if I put earplugs in. So then I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I went into my surgeon's office and I was like, what? You didn't mention. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, you'll get used to it.
No.
And now it gets to a point where I don't hear it that much. I sleep with the white noise machine, so obviously don't hear.
If like, could you hear it right now?
I don't hear it right now, but I know that like if I'm with people and it's really silent, like you can hear it.
If I was in the room with you and it was dead silent, could I hear it?
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, my nephew,
Wow.
after my surgery, I flew up to Montreal to stay with Justin. And my nephew, Nico, he's sitting across the room. He's like, Uncle Chris. I was like, yeah. He's like, I can hear it. I was like, hear what? He's like,
Oh.
your heart. And I was like, really? I was like, no, you can't. He's like, Uncle Chris, I can. And so then Justin sits down. He's like, yeah, I can hear it. I was like, oh. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that was actually the open heart surgery going through my sternum, way faster recovery than the lung surgeries. I mean, I ran my first 5K 3 weeks after that surgery. So, yeah.
Wow.
And they told me, they're like, look, you are in a good position to recover faster because you've taken care of yourself. Um, and then that led into like even now, like I've chosen to just not drink alcohol anymore.
Yeah.
And you say that's not great for a whole host of reasons,
I
but
mean, it's not good for most things.
yeah,
So, yeah,
most, right.
except fun.
Yes, exactly. But even then, I'm like, uh, I just,
But then, yeah, the trade-off, it's
uh,
how much fun, and then the next day, like, is it worth it? Yeah.
but I also realized for me, it doesn't bring out the best version of me. And I think I do a lot of the, like we talk about, the trauma or things that I haven't addressed. Sometimes they can, come up in
Yeah.
ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's kind of like the physical stuff that I've been through, and I think for the longest time I thought like even my when I got to Texas, and this is I know the timeline's all jumping around, but right before my heart surgery, I had moved back to Texas for a job opportunity with a guy named Liver King. Um, if you don't know who he is, you can just Google him or look him up on Instagram. You'll get a quick sense of this man.
Liver King.
Liver King.
Okay.
Um, Long
Well,
story short, that was a bad situation that I was in, and I was able to get
I
out of
think
that.
you referenced that in our last episode,
Yes,
and
yes,
you said,
yeah. Well, yeah. Him and I are on good terms, but I just need to get out of there. But I remember when I was moving to Texas, I was going through a divorce. I
Mhm.
had made a cross country move. Um, I was starting a new career, and my grandmother would eventually pass 2 weeks later. So all these things were happening at the same time. And I
Basically,
remember,
the five most stressful things. So in
mhm,
therapy, these are the things we look out for with clients. The five most stressful things that can happen in your life: divorce, moving, job loss, bereavement, breakup. Or no, but that's divorce. Wait, there's one more. There's a fifth one. But
it
yeah,
was all,
so
yeah, it was all, yeah, it
you've got
was
a
all
lot
happening.
of those.
And that was the first time that I had ever experienced a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was in my parents' house because I was waiting for my stuff to arrive. I was paying double rent at the time. Finances were stressed. And I'm just like, it's fine. And then I had a panic attack. And I remember it's everything that you hear about, right? It felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was having a heart attack. And then I thought, oh, I have a heart issue. Am I having a heart attack? And I remember my mom called the ambulance or 911 and they came and they were just like, look, you're having a panic attack. And then that's when I had my rock bottom moment where I'm like, I just don't want to feel anything anymore. Like, fuck this shit. I'm out. So I remember there's an app I use called Marco Polo. It's like a video chat app. So one of my best friends, he's a former Navy SEAL, and I sent him a message, and I just said, "Hey, Frankie, this is the last message you're going to get from me. I just need to let you know that I can't deal, but I love you." And that's all I sent him. And then he called me right away and he said, he's like, Chris, uh, it's not easy for me to talk about my trauma of being on the teams for, over 12 years, right? And like I've seen a lot of horrific things and I've seen a lot of my friends die. And he says, it's hard for me to talk about those things, but you know what I've been through. And he says, and I remember he said this and it talked me off the ledge instantly. He's like, look, if you want to check out early, then you're just a fucking coward. And he says, and we're not cowards. So that's all I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, fuck. I'm like, yeah, I'm not a coward. Like, fuck that shit. And so it was enough to realize like that would be, again, the easy choice to just end it. The harder choice is living, right? And I saw this really great post by, it was like some video of Shia LaBeouf, and he says, um, one thing that's certain in life is pain. We're all going to experience it. You can't get away from it, right? It's a certainty. But it's your choice what you choose to do with that pain, right? You can use it as a scapegoat, you can use it as a crutch, you can use it as an excuse, or you can use it to help others, right? And
Yeah.
so I always viewed my mental illness as this thing that was stopping me from being like the true person I could be, my like the potential. I'm always going to be stopped because of mental illness. But what I've realized in coaching people is that it's a superpower, because when someone's going through depression, any type of anxiety or PTSD, I know those dark places, right?
Yeah.
So I always tell people this that I work with when they get depressed and I don't hear from them, they get ghosted. I'm like, look, never in my 42 years of life on this planet have I ever come out of depression or a depressive episode and thought, thank God I totally turned inwards and shut everyone out because it totally helped. It's like never once have I ever said that. So I said, when I feel down and I'm having a dark day, what's easier? What's harder? Right? Easier, turn inwards, shut everyone out. Harder, reach out and talk to someone.
Yeah.
So it's just practicing those things, right?
And from
Understand.
a therapeutic perspective, in my experience with working with people who have suicidal ideation,
Mm-hmm.
to first assess how severe it is, we look at protective factors, right? So usually when someone's actually on the ledge or about to do it, whatever, however they choose to do it, they'll be like, this is really going to affect someone, right? And
Yeah.
so you've got your brothers, your family, your friend, like your good
Yeah.
friend, like there's so many people that would be devastated, right? And usually people are like, oh, like this would really fuck up my mom, or like, do you know what
Yeah.
I
It
mean?
would crush my mom, right?
Yeah.
And
And so
that,
that,
yeah.
and the fact that you left your friend a message says you didn't really want to do it
Yeah.
because you knew he would call you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a big protective factor. But also, when I talk to clients that are going through this, I'm like, because so many people, it's such a dark thought that they're not used to talking about it, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
they might admit that they've had some suicidal ideation. And I'm like, okay, like, tell me about it. What does that look like? You know, and they're like, oh, this is weird. Like, someone wants to
Yeah.
talk to me about it. And I'm like, how would
Yeah.
you do it?
Mm.
And that's how you know. Because if they're like, oh, I don't like, I just don't want to wake up tomorrow. And I'm like, so, okay, so you're going to go home tonight. What are you going to do? How are you not going to wake up?
So yeah, so for me, it was always like I would think about it, like how would I do it, right?
Yeah.
And
If
like, okay,
someone has a plan, then it's like, okay, we're going to, I might have to call your doctor and this is taking to another level. But if someone doesn't have a plan, then it's just an ideation. There's a huge difference.
well, my plan was just to try to find pills, right? And just OD. Like that was my plan, right?
Yeah, but then, although granted, you are in the United States, so it's much easier to find lethal pills than it is here. Here, to do that, you would actually have to stockpile.
Yeah,
So you can't just go home and go through your medicine cabinet and kill yourself. It's actually
exactly.
a little more difficult. If you're really serious, you could get a knife or a razor, but
Yeah.
most people wouldn't want to go that way.
Yeah. Well, don't you, it is true, right? Like men, first off, like suicide successful, like let's be honest, like there are a lot of people that try to do it and then aren't successful, but like
Mhm.
successful suicide men are higher, right? And usually it's more violent, right? It's going to be, like a
Or in the
gun.
US, a gun, very
Yeah.
easy to
Very
access,
easy.
not so easy in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had thought about that, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's just too messy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, it's like these thoughts. It's like, I'm like, and then what helps me also, and I think about this a lot, is like, what are the things I'd miss? And it always comes down
Mhm.
to little things, right? Hot coffee on a cold day, right? Having like a day like this in Knoxville where I can wear a zip up hoodie and like it's just I feel cozy, right?
Yeah.
Um, Feeling the sun sitting on a beach, right? Or just hanging out with Marissa or talking to my friends, spending time with quality time with friends and family, right? Like those things I would miss. And I'm like, oh God, I only got one ticket, I don't want to check out early,
Yeah.
but I think it also goes back, and we had kind of discussed this before we started this call, but I put a lot of my self-worth into two things: how I physically look,
Mhm.
right, and how much I'm making. And that has been a challenge, right?
Yeah. Which will
Uh,
tie directly into my next question. I wanted to ask you about like your money story,
yeah,
which is
so
probably going to be really complicated and interesting with your generational experience as well, like your ancestral experience. I imagine that'll be really interesting. What's like in your DNA, you know?
yeah, I don't see that's the thing is like even with just being adopted, I think, I don't there are moments where it's easy for me to forget that I'm adopted. Like I
Yeah,
don't view it like that.
of
Um,
course.
even though I think everyone's adoption story is different and their view on it is different. And I have friends that I've met people that have been adopted into like really terrible homes, and then their whole experience is completely different, right? I think
But
my
if you're
siblings,
part of your story, or at least what you are pretty sure from what you said in the last
Mhm.
recording, was that your biological parents couldn't afford, I mean, triplets.
Yes, so that's the story. Yeah, that's the story I was told. So now, whether any of that is true, I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
But all I know is that my siblings and I were very fortunate because, my dad worked for Exxon. Obviously, that's how you and I met, just like
Mhm.
family moving all over the world, experiencing everything, every
Yeah,
country we lived in.
international schools are like so bougie.
Yeah. Yeah. And just being able to vacation in the places we vacation all the time, right?
Mhm.
We travel all around the region of the country we lived in. And I just thought that that's what people did, right?
Mhm.
Um, Even down to like little things, right? Like anything that my siblings and I asked for Christmas, we got. And not only did we get one of them, we got three of them, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking in retrospect, I'm like, my parents are crazy. Like,
Your
what?
parents are amazing.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think early on, I just thought, wow, we can do all these things, and dad does well, right?
Yeah.
And then as I've gotten older, I've realized even now, uh, you know, my parents have the type of relationship where my mom is kind of she rather when it comes to finances it's more of the out of sight out of mind. I don't want to know, right? And I
Mm,
think that's because my father paid for everything, right?
yeah.
And so now it's at a point now where obviously they're much older. My dad's health is declining, and I have conversations with my mom a lot. I'm like, "Hey, do you understand where your finances are?
Yeah. Are your affairs in
What are you
order?
She has no idea. She has no
Mm,
idea accounts, passwords, how to log in them. She says, I go to the Merrill Lynch meetings and I don't like them and I don't go. I'm like, Mom, you got to stop putting this off, right? But then it or showed me in like a really focused way that my parents never talked to my siblings and I about finances, budgeting, saving, right? So then for the longest time in my 20s and 30s, I'm like, why can't I save money? I'm so bad at this, right? And I realized, oh, that's because I wasn't taught how to do these things.
yeah. I was never taught any of that. I find it's so frustrating. Like, why is there not a course in school about like
Yeah,
finances and budgeting? Why don't
yeah.
we, why do we have to do algebra fucking two? Finances and budgeting,
Well, as I do in relationships, that's the most difficult thing for.
relationships too, and like how to regulate your nervous system,
Yes, yes.
how to repair after an argument.
But like, I was never able to talk about money with anyone,
Mm.
right? And
Well, we're
so,
taught as a society, we're taught
oh,
not to.
yes, it's rude and like, oh, you don't talk about that. And it's like, look,
Rude because it might make someone feel insecure. I am over that shit. I don't
oh
care.
yeah,
How much money do you make?
yes,
Where does it
exactly.
come from? Let's talk about this.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so I think for me now, I'm, better late than never, but I'm fortunately in a place where, yeah, I've been able to start saving and really think about, how I budget and all those things. And, but then it goes back to if I'm not making a certain amount or what I consider comfortable, then I just feel less than, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult for me to separate those two, right?
Yeah.
Um, so,
I can
but
appreciate that.
yeah, and like even here in this country, based on the climate. people are losing their jobs and people don't know what's coming next, and it's just everything's getting more expensive, and you just, I don't know. I think it's, even with my coaching business, I noticed after, the start of this year, people are just not spending money, right? And
There's so much uncertainty.
yeah.
And I like, yeah, I mean, I haven't really noticed a slowing down in terms of getting new clients, but there is so much uncertainty. And coaching, therapy, these are considered like, you know, luxury,
Hmm.
luxury, non-essentials, although
Non-essential.
they are essential, but a
Yeah,
lot of people don't see it that way. It's not as essential as rent and food.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I just
So you
think,
feel like you had to not unlearn bad habits, but you had to learn productive habits with money.
yeah, I think it's just really looking at it, right? Before it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind, like my mom, right?
Mhm.
I don't, as long as I know what's kind of coming in, and I'm just gonna, buy this or do that, now it's getting to a point where even with my fiance, and I tell her, I mean, she's 31. I'm like, look, I wish someone told me at 31, it's like, just $500 a month, like just whatever, $200 a month, just something. I never did that, and
I
then to
know, I
think,
didn't either. Not until like 5 years ago. And even then it was still not a lot.
yeah.
But I'm
And
like,
now,
if I had if someone had told me this when I was like 16,
yeah,
I would be a millionaire. I would
I,
literally be a millionaire.
I know. And I
I am
tell,
not a millionaire.
no, me neither. And I tell Marissa this all the time. I'm like, look, you have a whole decade more.
Oh, by the time she's our age, she'll be at least a half millionaire.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, look, like that's just, even if it's $100, right?
Mhm.
Like it doesn't seem like that much, but you put that in a high yield savings account, or you put that into even just like, you know, stocks, right? Like 7% return on average, S&P 500, you're gonna do okay, right? Regardless of what's going on politically. So I'm like, just start, right? And I was like, look, I have a financial guy. Like, we can just open an account and you just put, even if it's $50, right? Just put something that whatever goes in there is never coming out, right? And just let it do its thing, right? Because before I would put in a savings account that had no interest that you could build off of. And then I'm like, it's just basically sitting there. And I'm like, that's such just, it's so silly, right?
Yeah, and with inflation, it's just sitting there losing value.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, depreciating slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going back to everything, right? Childhood, you know, it's what we're exposed to. And I think even with therapy, I try to, there are some people that are against it. And I just say, look, at the end of the day, there are so many things like, you think you're driving the car. You're not, right? There are so many things in your past and your experiences in your subconscious that you have zero access to that are driving the car, right? And so there was a great book, David Eagleman.
Mhm.
Uh, it's called Incognito. And
Okay.
it's like the book is Incognito, Different Lives of the Brain. And it kind of begs the question, do we have free will? Like the choices you make today, right now,
Only
are you
to
making?
a small degree.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he uses this analogy to think of like a big ship. You think you're the captain, but all the people that are like the Titanic, like throwing coal in the furnaces to get things moving, that's your subconscious. And the choice that you make right now to say, I don't know, do something, your subconscious has actually probably been mulling over for days, if not weeks, right? So now it's just come to your conscious thought as a thought, like I'm going to do this. So then I'm like, oh, and then he brings up situations where like um, the guy who went to the clock tower in Austin, Texas, and shot everyone, and then shot himself. They He had left a journal, and he says,
Mm.
"I've been asking for help 4 months, and I think there's something wrong with me. I'm getting very aggressive. So when I do this, which I'm gonna do, no one's stopping me because no one's helping me. I want you to do an autopsy on my brain." And they found there was a tumor pushing on his part of his brain that was, you know, creating violent behavior. So then you ask the question, well, he didn't really have control, right? And then he brings up
You
another
didn't have to buy
situation.
a gun.
True, true. But the aggression,
Yeah,
he's
he could have done something else. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah.
whatever.
And then there's another situation that this in the book where he talks about this man who he had a gambling problem, um, and then his in-laws basically sat him down and said, "We'll pay off all your debts if you promise to get help." And then he says, "Absolutely." So next morning he wakes up covered in blood in a police station. He doesn't know why he's there. And so what had happened was he had sleptwalk. And again, to this day, I'm like, this isn't even happening. He had sleptwalk, drove his car across town to his in-laws and murdered the father-in-law, and then I guess thought he had murdered the mother-in-law or vice versa, and then goes to the police station to confess, but he has no recollection of it.
What?
I know.
No.
I know. So then they said they did some sleep studies, and so like it's extremely rare. But I'm like, but then basically his point is like there are things that our brains do that are outside of our conscious being. So like, where do we draw the line? And he's just trying to create a conversation, right? Like how much free will do we have?
Was he
Right?
on that weird, what's that those sleeping pills that make people like trip out?
Oh no, no, no! I don't think he was on anything. They just said that when they did sleep studies on him, the that point of where we get out of REM sleep into conscious, like something skipped the step in his brain. So, and there are people that sleepwalk and eat and like do these things. Like sleepwalking
Yeah,
is a
I
thing.
know. And they
But
do
then,
things like they pee in the refrigerator or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah. But to
I think
drive a
you would
car,
wake up when you're driving and murdering. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know, but that
I
seems,
know, I know, I know, I know, I know. Anyway, it's a really interesting book. But then that also led me to another book that I read called First Rate Madness, and it's talking about all these historic world leaders going from um,
good to
FDR.
heal.
Yeah, well, no, FDR, JFK, Gandhi, Churchill, MLK, to Stalin, Hitler, and it shows that all of them suffered from mental illness, right? And what was interesting is that during times of turmoil, most of these leaders actually fared better because of their mental illness, right? So, like Lincoln, severe depression during that time period, he just understood like for him, it was like because of his depression, he's like you just shouldn't own someone, right? Like that's wrong. And then it gets to like JFK, who was manic, like hypersexual, just like kind of all over the place, little sleep, high energy, but made really good choices during times of stress and turmoil.
Yeah, and Winston Churchill was really good during wartime, but then after
Yeah,
wartime, he managed
terrible.
to stay for a little bit longer because he did so well during wartime. But also his day-to-day beliefs, he was extremely racist and misogynistic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he did a really good job in the war, and he should have just,
And
that's,
that's what they said in this book. They say during times of peace, these people that did well during war did not do very well.
yeah,
Right?
because we could probably chaotic childhood stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but that book also helped me kind of realize, oh well, like maybe I can use what I think is a negative thing as a positive, right? And I always tell people, like people, like my clients always say, "Oh, today I failed," and I think I touched upon this earlier, but like, I'm like, look, it's just changing your perspective on what that is, right? If you want to think of failure as a negative thing, then sure, but it's just an opportunity, right? And you're never going to succeed without failing, right? So you need to kind of embrace, you know, scary. You need to embrace discomfort, right? Even down to my clients feeling hungry. I tell them like, look, you need to kind of embrace that because first, that's a good signal, right? It says that you're eating a caloric deficit, your body's working, right? But stop applying a negative feeling towards hunger, right? That's going to just be part of it. And just view it as, your body burning fat, right? Or using whatever fuel you have in you that's not excess, right? And I think it's just your perception, it's your perspective. And if you can just, that's my goal as a coach, is just to kind of shift it just a little, right? View it from this angle rather than the angle you've always seen it through or the lens that you've always seen it through.
Well, and it's also, that's like a comfort thing, right?
Mhm.
And you touched on in the last episode that your capacity for discomfort is very high because of everything you've been through, and you choose to continue challenging yourself. But people are way too comfortable,
Yeah.
And in therapy, from like a mental health perspective, it's like when people are like, "Oh, but I don't want to feel this." And it's like, "Yeah, but you have to."
Yeah.
It's part of the human experience. Like you
Yes.
and we are so fucking uncomfortable with being
Hmm.
uncomfortable that like
Hmm.
people just can't, they like spiral out, they can't deal with it. But you have to learn to an extent to sit with whatever discomfort you're going
It's the
through.
when Headspace first came out, I really, really like it was great because it was the first meditation app that uh, kind of portrayed concepts through little cute cartoons. And I'll never forget the
I
first
have a
one.
couple clients that really they like swear by it. It's like the only way they can meditate
Yes.
and get through. Yeah.
Yes. And one of the first cartoons that I watched that really it sticks with me to this day is this idea of, and I tell this to my clients a lot, like, look, when you have emotions, negative ones, it's important to observe them, feel them, but not let them take you away with the tide. And so this cartoon demonstrates this idea where it's this little cute cartoon guy sitting on a park bench and he's watching the cars go by. Every car represents a different emotion. The goal of the exercise is to watch the cars go by, not to see one car that you're hyper focused on and then chase it down the road, right? And that's essentially what it is. And I always, as you know, like it's not about not feeling it. You have to feel it, right? But like you said, just sit with the feeling,
Mhm.
observe it, which is super difficult to do, obviously.
Yeah.
Observe it, and then just allow yourself, like, I'm sad, right?
Yeah,
And
I say you have to name it as a lot of the time because people will feel overwhelmed, but they have a really hard time pinpointing what it is.
yes.
So I will often give people a feelings wheel that's
Oh, that's
really
good.
detailed. It's really good to use with kids actually. But
Yeah.
it's like yeah, I think the outside is like five big emotions, and then
Mhm.
under each one is like
Turtles is, yeah.
many options, and it gets, until it gets more granular. And that's really, really helpful. But I say that emotions are very like they want to pass by, like your analogy with the car, but you have to acknowledge them. And if you
Yep.
ignore them, then that's where that expression of what you resist persists.
Yep.
So it's and I the analogy that I give to people is that emotions are like toddlers,
Hmm.
and they want your attention. They want your exclusive attention, but
I like
just
that.
for like a few minutes. But
Yes.
you need to put the phone down, you need to
Yep.
close your laptop, and it's like, look at me. And you can be like, hey, I see you. What is it? What is it? Are you mad? Are you sad? And then just, be with them for a couple minutes. And then they're like, okay, cool. And then they'll go off and play again. And
Yep.
it will pass through you. But if you try to be like, ugh, I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to feel it. I'm gonna drink, or I'm gonna, you know,
Eat or
yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna binge eat, I'm gonna, take drugs, whatever. No, just sit with it,
Yep.
acknowledge it, and then let it go.
Yeah,
So much
it's
easier said than done, but that's what it
oh,
is.
100%. Right? I struggle with that all the time, right? And it's just it's I guess it's our natural inclination to want to just not feel negative things, right?
Hmm.
But that's going back to just understanding how to self-regulate. And I think that that's also taught from your childhood, right? Where
Or not.
or not, right?
Most of the
Right.
time,
So,
not.
yeah, most of the not, right?
Yeah.
You can have a parent that just says, "Well, don't feel that," or
Well,
"It's okay."
especially when you're parents, most of
Yes.
us have very strong examples of parents that didn't know how to do that. I
Yeah.
certainly do.
Oh no, no. Yeah, that's very much kind of what it is where you kind of just out of sight, out of mind, just sweep it under the rug, right?
Sweep it under the rug or have a huge explosion
Yep.
and then never talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like my mom is Irish Italian, very loud family, right? And that's what I remember as a kid is that she, from a third person perspective, just sounded like she was always kind of yelling. That's just the way she spoke, but like that's how it kind of was, right? I just remember that. And then it got to a point where you kind of get desensitized to it and you're like, okay, she's just like getting worked up. Um, but I can see now in my adult life how some of that stuff I can either manage the same way and I can see direct patterns, right?
Hmm.
Which is like anything else, it's just first step is just becoming aware of them, right? And then making small steps to take action towards changing, right?
And that also goes back to what your coach said to you about standing on the line.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much about choosing how you're going to behave, right? You
And it's
do
a choice, right?
actually have a
But that's
choice.
the thing is like
Yeah.
you need to understand that like in most cases, we do have more agency than we think.
Hmm.
And it's just understanding that. And I don't know if you follow a guy named Alex Hormozy. If you don't, it's just Hormozy, Hormozi, I think. He's amazing. And he has all these little idioms. And one thing and I use this, I've stolen it directly from him. And I tell my clients, look, uh, they'll tell me something like, this is so tough, or like, this is so hard. And I'm like, look, yes, it is. Making change inherently is difficult.
Hmm.
But let's just change the story. So if we say this is like tough and then it's going to feel twice as challenging, right?
And the brain hates change.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I steal from Hormozy is like, look, if we can just say these things are challenges for sure, but challenges are meant to be overcome, right? And when you overcome this one specific challenge, we equate that to you slaying a dragon. Now we have empirical evidence that you can slay dragons. And guess what? There's going to be more dragons in your future. So you can choose to be a person that just says, or you can choose to be a dragon slayer. Which do you choose to be? And everyone's like, holy shit, I want to be a dragon slayer. It's like, yeah, no shit, right? But it's just the story that we tell ourselves can become self-fulfilling prophecies. And I'm just like that, right? So when I was a child, and you can see it on almost every baby picture, I'm always crying. And so since then, my grandmother, she kind of nicknamed me Chris the Crank. And I always, every time something like my mom was like, oh, Chris the Crank, Chris the Crank. And it was at one point with my business partner in Miami with the gym, Tony. He's a big Tony Robbins guy, right? And he says, Chris, like I really don't like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says,
Mm.
you realize why can't that's like a negative thing to identify as like why can't you be Chris the coach or something else, right? And I was like, oh my God, have I been like, you know?
It takes a moment like that of self-awareness, though. I
Mm.
I don't know how old I was or when it happened, but I do remember having a moment where I was like, when I was younger, I know that I used to complain about stuff a lot more. And I can't remember when it happened, but it was like a conscious choice. And I was like, ugh, I don't want to be like that. And that's, the beginning of
Just that
taking
awareness.
power
Yeah,
back and being like, right,
exactly.
I am not going to be the victim and I'm not going to whine. And
Yeah.
I don't like being around people who,
Well, you're hyper like vigilant about it. You're like just sensitive, right? When
yeah,
someone is like, I've been in past relationships with a person who's always passive aggressive. So now it's like that's like I just can't deal with passive
yeah,
aggressive behavior,
yeah.
right?
And
And
even
so
like I've had it with work people. I mean, this was a long time ago, but I remember there was some people that I worked with. It was like 7 or 8 years ago when I was an event manager. And they, it's hospitality, you've got to manage a lot of waiters and waitresses and people who don't really want to be there, they're clocking in and out and it's just stressful schedule, whatever, late nights, long hours, whatever. And I remember after a few events in a row, especially during the holiday season when there's like party after party, and everyone just wanted to sit down after an event, have a couple drinks and just bitch and moan. And I
yes.
remember I was like, are you guys gonna like, are you looking for solutions or do you just want to complain? And my two friends at the time were like, yeah, we kind of just want to complain. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna go sit over there because I am exhausted and this is not
Your
the end.
tolerance for it, right, is
Yeah,
like you don't have anymore, right?
yeah,
You know,
I
yeah,
don't get high on that. It
yeah.
sucks. So you go over there and do that and I'm gonna go over here.
And it's just it's that's where like negative things can just be negative, right? And
Mhm.
it's just like, look,
And
I'm
it's
all
the
for
negativity or misery loves company.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm all for people venting, right? But if you're not willing, and I say this all the time, like, look, you can vent, you can complain, that's fine. We all do that. We have that right to do that. But if you get to a point where you're complaining about the same thing over and over, you're not willing to change it, then guess what? Like that's just stop talking about it,
That's
right?
your
If not,
choice.
yeah, right?
If
So
you're aware of it and you keep doing it, then that's your choice.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If you're not aware of it, fine. But if you are, once you become aware of it, it's then hence or going forward your choice.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's I don't know, adulting sucks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think going back to that notion of, when you experience something negative, I sometimes welcome it because there is the balance, right? Because if you can't experience the negative things in a productive way, then you're never really going to appreciate the good things, right? And that's why when I meet people that are just always happy, I'm like, no,
No.
get the fuck out of here. Like, no, like, yeah, no, 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 no. And so I just think it's more about changing the narrative, right? Is just it's okay, right? It's okay to not be okay type of thing, right?
Mhm.
And that's why I've been very open about my mental illness because, we live in a here in the States for sure, it's like man up, suck up, don't show emotions, don't cry, don't and I think that that's definitely shifting, but still it's like it's not easy, and I think a lot of
It has a
my
long path to take before it's a full shift. So yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah. It's got some catching up to do.
a lot, you know. Um, but even with my clients I work with, mainly mothers, right? I think that they struggle with the same thing that men struggle with, which is asking for help and leaning on others.
Yeah.
And it's too often like I need to put myself last because I have my family and I have my kids, and it's not about me. I'm like, yeah, but over time, you're going to get to a point where now you're not where you want to be. You're showing up as a very small version of you. And A, that's not a great example for your kids. B, you project that on other people. We all do, right? When we're not happy with ourselves. And then C, it's going back to that idea of pouring from an empty cup. So you got to take care. The most selfless thing you can do as a parent is to be selfish.
Yeah.
That's the narrative that we need to start changing. Is that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be around to see things that you want to see. And I would argue, we don't have kids, but people with kids have a pretty big why, right? Like they want to see those kids grow up and potentially have grandkids and play with those grandkids. But guess what? That none of that stuff becomes a reality unless you start taking care of yourself
Yeah.
now, right? And it's
And setting the example to your kids
exactly.
of prioritizing yourself and your health.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
important. My friend in California actually she ran something yesterday. I don't know. I don't think it was a marathon. I think it was like a 10K or a half marathon
Okay.
something. And it's her husband and her kids are there, cheering
Hmm.
her on. And she posted it and she said, "I want my kids to see me working my
Exactly.
ass off." And I was like,
Exactly.
"Good mother." It's
Yeah,
important.
because it's helping them understand that, I think a lot of people view even just like the gym, it's like, oh, that's vanity. It's like, no, this is literally, if you
Essential.
want to, yeah, if you want to reverse aging, you can do that, right? Just through lifestyle things, changes that you can make every day. And, it's more about, investing in yourself because too often I think, we've seen it, especially in this country for sure. It's just plan A is always pharmaceutical intervention, right? It's always just a pill for an ill. And, you know, I I see a shift in it within the health and wellness space, but people are gonna getting back to this idea that, I'd rather you exhaust all holistic resources first.
Yeah.
Then yeah, if you're in that percentage of people that needs a GLP-1, fine, right? But that should not be your plan A
No,
because
certainly not. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've seen so many clients that either get gastric bypass, a sleeve, they lose 120 pounds, Now their stomach is this small, and then they gain all the weight back. And they wonder why. I'm like, look, your appearance is a consequence of what you do every day, right? And if you don't change those habits, you don't change the way you manage your stress, then what do you like? Come on, it's like, what do you
I mean,
think's gonna?
there's so many things that we have touched on in this episode that just go back to this like basic education of like how to function in life, whether
Mhm.
it be finances, mental health, physical health. I would love to start a revolution where these things are all taught in school. You
Yep.
cannot graduate if you don't understand the importance of diet, exercise, sleep, like meditation, mental health, and basic budgeting. Like,
The problem is in this
no one
country,
knows how to do any of it.
no, but in this country, the system is designed to keep people sick, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just too much money, right? These companies are profiting, even food companies, right? They do the studies on, sugar and, the perfect amount of fat and salt, texture,
Yeah.
crunch. It's designed to hijack your brain.
The bliss point, right? Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it was. That was
Yeah.
in Fast Food Nation. When I read that
Yeah.
book, I was like,
Yeah.
ugh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's engineered, right? We are in a time where food is being engineered, and there are shareholders and there are profits that they want to make, and it's just about, like uh, Peter Attia, I love, and he has a book called Outlive, and he talks about medicine 2.0, which is kind of where we're in now, right? Which is really great for, look, you get in a car accident, you want medicine 2.0, right? But when it comes to long-term diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, all these things that people are kind of, they find these things out too late, right? It's like, oh, I found out it's stage 4, right? So we're not in the game of like trying to treat these things now. It's more like, oh, for acute trauma, we're killing it, but not for
Yeah, not for preventative.
preventative, right?
Yeah.
There's no preventative medicine right now. And
Yeah,
so that's where he would like to see things
I
change, right?
agree.
But then that's
That's
going
like,
into changing the things that are most challenging for people, right?
yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean, the society as a whole, it all needs to be sort of deconstructed and then reconstructed.
yeah, yeah.
Dr. Zach Bush, have you heard of
Mhm.
him?
No.
He's pretty incredible as well. He works a lot with the people who are dying, and so
Mhm.
his observations are really profound and moving. But he's really obsessed with like the microbiome and
Mhm.
soil regeneration. And he became, I mean, he's been popular for a while, but he had a lot of things that came out during COVID about how it is impacting our bodies and our societies. And he spoke out a lot about the lockdowns and mental health and
Mhm. Mhm.
natural things that people can do that are preventative, like getting sunshine and being with
Yeah.
loved ones, all of which was they were
Yeah.
like, stay inside, isolate. And it's like, oh my God, that's so bad for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Why do you think that punishments in like solitary confinement is
yeah,
they're not designed like that, right?
yeah,
We're designed to thrive in tribes and groups. And so, but it's all the basic things, right? I tell people, look, if you just get outside, walk, right? Focus on sleep and just eat real whole foods. And again, getting into like weight training and stuff like that, but just doing some basic things but consistently doing them, right? Doing them on days where you don't want to do them, you know, your life will change, right? And I think too often it's just going back to just what's comforting, what's easy, what's convenient. And I think people would rather be miserable in a situation that they're comfortable
mhm,
with, like it's the known, but it's the unknown of like, oh well, if I step outside my comfort zone, then it's all on me, right?
yeah.
If things don't work
That's why
out.
people stay in abusive and toxic relationships.
Exactly. Right.
Just crazy. Your brain is like wired to mess you up. So
Yeah.
you have to beat it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is coming up to an hour and 10 minutes now. So
It flies
we can
by.
just talk forever.
I know. I know. I know. But I think it's, you know, I don't know. I just think that as different as everyone feels like people are, I think we're all like it's all the human experience. It's all the same. It's
We're all
all
fighting the same
yeah,
battles.
yeah, yeah. Even like one of my friends, she lives in Switzerland, and she was talking about her boyfriend is going through. He's been dealing with this elbow issue forever, but he's gone to two doctors that said, "Oh, there's nothing that we can see," and then finally one doctor said, like, he has a tear, right? And I'm like, I just thought, oh, that's America, right? Because you just go through doctors and you're getting just misdiagnosed or just things are being missed. But it's everywhere, right? Like I always think, well, no, medicine is just maybe better elsewhere, but it's like everyone's system is kind of broken. And, I just, I don't know. It made me realize that, look, the grass always feels greener, right? But at the end of the day, I think it doesn't matter where you are, we're all struggling with the same shit.
And we
So,
all have the power to take some control back, but it takes
absolutely.
self-awareness and like determination.
And ownership, right? It's just taking ownership that, you know what, you know, the moment I start taking ownership, then that's where people were like, well, I don't, then it's all on me, right? I like blaming everything else, right?
Hmm.
Just like, no, I understand the comfort level of that, but then I'm like, no, I want to be able to, if things fail, then it's on me, and then I learn from it and do that. But you know, you gotta get out of this kind of mental masturbation moments where it's like you can just overanalyze things and think. But it's like, look, saying you're gonna do the thing is not doing the thing, right? You just gotta actually just do the thing.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah,
Yeah. So I think we said last time, if people want more of you, if they want to work with you, if they want to find you, is everything beyond the tats,
hmm
which we will talk about the tats
yes,
in our next episode.
yeah. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, beyondthetest.com, and you can find that same handle on basically every social media platform: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you know. So
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
yeah,
And that was really fun. Yeah.
yeah, it's always fun chatting, and yeah, I'm glad we could reconnect because I think I definitely you made me think about just so many other kids that we went to school with, and like I just want to reconnect with. So maybe I can get you to make that happen.
Yeah.
Like Fadi is someone I want to catch up with, like for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
that'd
make
be
sure he watches. Don't worry.
okay. Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Okay.
Well, till
Well,
next time.
yeah. Chat soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.